For most of human history, people genuinely did not know that sex caused pregnancy. This is not a joke. There were entire societies, studied by actual anthropologists in the actual 20th century, that believed babies came from spirits, from ancestral ghosts, from eating certain fruit, from the moon, from basically anything except the one thing that was actually causing it. And I know your modern brain is already rejecting this. It seems like the single most obvious cause and effect relationship in the world. But it absolutely is not, and here's why. The cause and the effect are separated by 9 months. If you ate a sandwich and a small person appeared 3/4 of a year later, you'd struggle to connect those two events as well. There is no other cause and effect relationship in all of nature with a delay that long. Fire burns you instantly. Fall off a cliff. Instant. But sex and babies? A season and a half apart. The universe could not have designed a less intuitive link if it was actively trying to mess with us. Which leaves us with one spectacular question. If ancient humans didn't know what sex was for, if they had no idea it was the thing making the babies, then why were they so relentlessly, enthusiastically, distractingly into it? That question unlocks almost everything about being human. And it starts with a fact that makes the whole thing stranger. Nobody discovered sex. Ever. How did ancient humans discover sex is a trick question. Because sex is roughly 1.2 billion years old. It's older than animals, older than plants having flowers, older than legs, older than the concept of a face. Our ancestors didn't invent it or discover it. They inherited it, the way you inherited breathing. They were handed the most powerful biological program in existence with no manual and no clue what it was for, and then, being human, made it about 1,000 times more complicated than it needed to be. That complication is the whole story. Start with the obvious question that isn't obvious at all. Why does sex even exist? Because reproduction doesn't require it. Plenty of organisms just clone themselves. No partner, no drama, no awkward morning after. And cloning is a better deal on paper. You pass on 100% of your genes instead of a measly 50. You do half the work of building a whole new organism and only half of it is even you. Financially speaking, sex is a scam. So why did it win? Why did basically every complex organism on Earth, every animal, every tree, you, end up using the objectively worst method? One word: variety. When you clone yourself, your offspring has all your weaknesses too. If a disease can kill you, it can wipe out your entire identical family line, because you're all the same lock and the disease has the key. But sex shuffles the deck. Half your genes, half someone else's. A brand new combination every time. Some of your kids, by pure luck, will resist the thing that would have killed a clone army. Sex is biological insurance against a hostile, ever-changing world full of things trying to eat you and infect you. Which means the entire reason sex exists, the love songs, the heartbreak, the awkward first date, is fundamentally an ancient defense mechanism against disease. Romantic? I know. Put that on a Valentine's card. Sit with that for a second because it reframes everything that follows. Every feeling you're about to hear me explain is built on top of a system whose original job was just dodging parasites. The point is, by the time anything resembling a human showed up, sex was already ancient and wired deep into the brain's reward system. Our ancestors didn't decide to want it. Their brains were pre-built too, the same way they were built to want food and water. The wanting came first. The understanding came a billion years later, if at all. But here's where humans took this ancient inherited program and did something genuinely bizarre with it. We made it weird. For most animals, sex is strictly seasonal and strictly functional. There's a mating season. Hormones spike, everyone's suddenly very interested, the deed gets done, and the switch flips off for a year. The female is only receptive in a narrow window when she can actually conceive, and she advertises it, loudly, visibly, unmistakably. Baboons get colorful. Cats get, let's say, vocal. The whole system concentrates all sexual behavior into the exact moment it can make offspring, and shuts off completely the rest of the time. Humans looked at that sensible system and threw it directly in the bin. We have no mating season. None. Humans are interested all year round, every month on a random Tuesday in February for no reason whatsoever. And stranger still, human ovulation is concealed. Hidden. A woman's fertile window isn't advertised to anyone, and here's the wild part. It's largely hidden even from herself. Most species broadcast fertility like a billboard. Humans encrypted it. Nobody can tell from the outside when conception is possible, which means humans behave as though any time is potentially the right time. Biologically, that makes no sense. Why spend enormous energy on a behavior most of the time when it can't even produce the one thing it's theoretically for? You don't evolve a system this strange by accident. It was doing a job, just not the job you'd expect. So what was the job? Bonding. And this is where ancient human sex stops being about biology and becomes about the whole structure of human society. Here's the logic. Human babies are, to put it kindly, a disaster. They're born more helpless than almost any animal on Earth. A baby deer walks within an hour. A baby human can't hold up its own head for months and won't be genuinely self-sufficient for 18 years. And even then it'll call you asking how to boil an egg. Raising something that useless for that long is an enormous multi-year project, and for most of history it was very hard to do alone. So evolution had a problem. How do you get two adults to stick together, cooperating, for years? Long enough to drag a helpless infant to survival. You need glue. And that glue, one leading theory goes, is exactly what all that unnecessary sex is for. By spreading sex across all the time instead of one fertile window, humans turned it into a continuous bonding ritual. A pair bond maintenance system. The brain chemistry backs this up. Sex and intimacy release oxytocin, the same bonding chemical involved in the connection between parent and child. Sex got quietly repurposed. It stopped being only about making the baby and became just as much about keeping together the two people who had to raise it. Which means the entire emotional universe we've built around sex, attraction, attachment, the specific agony of missing one particular person, is very likely an ancient survival adaptation for raising catastrophically needy babies. You have feelings because your ancestors' babies were useless. You're welcome. But sit with what that actually means for a moment, because it's genuinely moving once it lands. Somewhere out there, 100,000 years ago, two exhausted people stayed up through a cold night, keeping a fire going for an infant that could do nothing, couldn't walk, couldn't speak, couldn't even hold up its own head. And they stayed not because they understood genetics or ovulation or any of it, but because they felt something for each other they couldn't name and didn't want to lose. That feeling is the reason you're here. Love, in the most literal biological sense, is the thing that kept our helpless ancestors alive long enough to become us. It wasn't a luxury. It was survival equipment. And you carry the exact same equipment, still running, right now. And once you have pair bonds, you have something to protect, which is where the awkward third guest shows up. Jealousy. It's not a character flaw or a modern neurosis. It's a very old alarm system that fires when a pair bond is threatened, and it appears in every single human culture ever documented. That universality is a giant flashing sign that it was standard equipment in the ancestral environment. Jealousy is basically your ancestors' anxieties, fossilized into a feeling and handed to you fully assembled. An app you never installed and cannot delete, running in the background, draining your battery. So before we've even touched culture, ancient human sex has quietly produced love, attachment, the family unit, and jealousy. That's most of a soap opera, generated entirely by biology, before anyone wrote a single rule down. Speaking of rules, here's where humans really pull ahead of every other animal. Animals have sex, only humans have opinions about it. At some point, ancient humans started treating sex not just as a thing they did, but as a thing that meant something. Look at the evidence they left behind. Some of the oldest art humans ever made is about sex and fertility. The so-called Venus figurines, carved tens of thousands of years ago by people who had almost nothing and still spent precious time making them. Whatever they meant exactly, they tell us one thing for certain. Sex and fertility weren't just biological events. They were charged with meaning, important enough to make into art. And art is what humans do when something matters more than survival strictly requires. And once sex means something, you get rules about it. Every human society ever studied has rules around sex. Who can, who can't, when, with whom. The specifics vary wildly, which tells you the rules are invented, not instinctive. But the existence of rules is universal, which tells you something bigger. Humans everywhere felt this powerful, ancient, chaotic urge needed to be managed. A baboon does not have in-laws. A baboon does not have a concept of scandal. Humans took the oldest instinct in biology and wrapped it in an elaborate cage of custom, taboo, and ritual. And that cage is arguably one of the foundations of civilization itself. And then ancient humans did one more thing almost nothing else on Earth does. They started closing the door. For most animals, sex is completely public. Nobody's embarrassed, nobody waits for the others to leave. But humans, even in tiny bands with no walls and no privacy, developed a strong instinct to take it somewhere private. They wait for dark, they slip off into the trees, they make quiet arrangements. Why? Because once sex is tangled up with bonds and jealousy and status, it becomes information. And information about who's doing what with whom is powerful and dangerous and worth controlling. Privacy around sex isn't prudishness invented by some later civilization. It's ancient. And it flows directly from the fact that for humans, sex was never just physical. So, here's the whole absurd, beautiful picture. Ancient humans did not discover sex. Nobody did. It arrived pre-installed, over 1 billion years old, wired into the brain before anything resembling a human existed. Our ancestors inherited the most powerful drive there is with zero understanding of what it did or where babies came from. And for most of history, they genuinely believed the babies came from somewhere else entirely. But then they did something no other animal did. They stripped out the mating season and wanted each other all year round. They hid ovulation so thoroughly even they couldn't track it. They turned sex into the glue holding together the exhausted parents of the most helpless babies on Earth. They grew love and jealousy out of it like branches off a trunk. They carved it into art, wrapped it in rules, and closed the door on it. Animals have sex. Humans built an entire emotional and social universe on top of it and then mostly forgot it was even there underneath. And that unbroken chain, billions of ancestors who all passed life forward without ever fully understanding how, runs directly to you. You are the latest link. Every crush, every heartbreak, every 2 a.m. text you shouldn't have sent is the far end of a process that started in the ocean over 1 billion years ago and has never once stopped. Your ancestors didn't know how it worked. They just knew they didn't want it to end. So the next time you feel that ancient, confusing, completely irrational pull toward another human being, you're not being dramatic. You're not being weird. You're doing the single oldest thing your lineage has ever done. You're just doing it with far more feelings than the situation strictly requires, which might be the most human thing there is. If your ancient ancestors could see what we've turned this into, the poetry, the weddings, the entire music industry, the situationships, do you think they'd be proud or completely baffled? Let me know in the comments. See you soon.